Jordan Tal. I am the coordinator for the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh's Mega Mission to Israel, scheduled for June 13th through the 21st, 2022. Mega Mission is a community-wide 5-star travel experience to Israel over the course of 9 days and 8 nights. We hope that you'll join us on this journey if you haven't registered yet. In preparation, Mega Mission is hosting virtual tours led by our actual tour guides. So thank you for attending our first session of an 8-part series of virtual tours of Israel led by our Mega Mission tour guides. Our Israel journey tonight will be led by tour guide Zalman Spivack. Please correct me if I said your last name wrong. Originally from Baltimore, Maryland, Zalman made Aliyah with his family at the age of 7. Zalman grew up in Jerusalem and Efrat. Zalman joined and completed his IDF service as a sergeant. Zalman is a licensed tour guide, certified by the Ministry of Tourism in Israel. He received a degree in Jewish history from Hebrew University. He studied education and is studying for his master's degree in Jewish pluralistic education. Since 2001, Zalman has been working with youth all over the world, in Israel and abroad. From 2007 to 2010, he served as the Israel emissary in Los Angeles for the Jewish Agency and the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism. For the past few years, Zalman has been developing and managing incoming missions to Israel for Giant Leaps, which is also organizing our Pittsburgh Mega Mission on behalf of the Jewish Federation of North America, Jewish organizations, synagogues, families, and private VIP tours. Today, Zalman is a freelance educator and tour guide. Zalman and his wife, Braha, have 3 children and live in Nofei Prat, a mixed Jewish community in the foothills of the Judean desert between Jerusalem and the Dead Sea, which I imagine to be quite amazing. Through our presentation, please feel free to type any questions you may have down in the chat box, or you can message them to Emily or myself. After Zalman finishes the presentation, we'll have time for some questions and answers with him. So I am going to pass it to Zalman. He is in Israel on Israeli time, so we really appreciate you doing this tour for us.
Thank you. Good evening or good middle of the night for me. You can all hear me? Just give me some thumbs up. We're good? Somebody? Okay, yes, I can see you. Great. The only thing I'll do with my bio is it should have been shorter, and I have 4 kids and not 3, which are really the great part of my life. So my name is Zalman, as you said, and I'm going to be one of the educators and tour guides on the mission. This is not going to be my first mission with Pittsburgh, and on my first mega mission. I'm just going to bring up my presentation. So a second, I hope you can all see me right now, and I now am trying to see you again, because while I bring you up, you guys get lost, and now we can start. Okay, so what we decided to do today is the first one of our tours. It's a little bit different when we're online than when you're on the ground or boots on the ground, and hopefully it's going to happen earlier and not earlier, but faster than you think you're going to be here as a big, great mission. We're not going to do one site. I'm not going to tour like Jerusalem and say, hey, let's take the Western Wall of Jerusalem and now talk about it for the next 45 minutes with a couple slides. But the idea really is to show you how we're going to jump around Israel. We're going to maybe call it Zoom around Israel, because on Zoom we can go everywhere. We could be in 1 hour all over the country from the top to bottom and take anecdotes of different stories and weave it together to a story that makes a little bit more sense thematically for us to understand what is Israel, what's Israel all about. And the decision was to take a topic that I teach a lot called Dreamers and Achievers, to deal not with the ancient history, which is definitely part of Israel, our deep roots, historical roots that we get tied to the land through our agriculture and through texts and through walking the land is really important, and we will get there, and you're definitely going to see some of it on the mega mission, but actually to deal with the modern Zionist history until today. And Dreamers and Achievers, usually it takes various topics, and we look at them from the perspective of people pre-state. Let's take, just for an example, 70 years before the creation of the state of Israel, when a short guy with a good haircut, David Ben-Gurion, gets up in Tel Aviv on the 14th of May and declares, I hereby declare a Jewish state to be called the state of Israel. People had to put that state in motion. So we look at how they put it in motion 70 years before, how that same topic played out for the past 70 years of the existence of the state of Israel, and maybe the vision and the dreamers and achievers of taking that forward. So for example, the dream for Jewish self-defense we could take, right? The work that was done pre-state to have an army, and the army that fought the wars and brought us till today, and where is the Israeli self-defense going to in the future? So today we're going to take a topic that's going to be all about agriculture. Not only is agriculture seen in the Israeli and the Zionist thought as a prerequisite to the redemption of the land, and for some Zionists, it was actually the redemption of the people in the land through the agriculture. But agriculture has not only been a vessel for creating the state of Israel and the economy and the people in Israel, it is really changing and evolving until last week, with big changes in Knesset, in our parliament, regarding what could be imported and exported, which is bringing a lot of damage to the farmers here in Israel, because they're bringing in now a lot more import, which is bringing down their prices from Turkey or from whatever it is, and they have to do changes. So I would like to look at that a little bit. So we're going to look at it through a very specific story. It's going to be a story of dates, and for that we're going to start. I'm going to show you maps. This is a map of Israel. We're going to start all the way in the north. You can see this is the south of Israel. I hope you can see my pointer. We're going to go all the way to where this little red dot is, to Kinneret. Kinneret is one of the first kibbutzim, collective way of living in Israel, that was created in 1909. It's on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, or the Lake of Galilee, okay, Lake Kinneret. It's funny that we call this a sea, it's a lake, and Israel fits like 10 times into Lake Michigan, so it's all about size, right? And we call it a sea. We're going to go all the way up there. This is what it would look like from a perspective of an aerial view. This is the lake. You can see on the left, on the western side, the mountains of the Galilee. On the right, on the eastern side, this is the Golan Heights, which rise above the lake. Okay, the lake is about 200 and some meters below, it's 600 feet below sea level. Okay, and all the way at the top would be the Hermon, or the Hermon Mountain, the border with Israel and with Syria. And we're going to go, down here to the shores to where this farm was, but we're actually not going to go onto the farm. We're going to go to the cemetery, because we could learn a lot from the cemetery. This is what the entrance of the cemetery, if we were getting off the bus on the mission, would look like. You would get off the bus, you would walk in with us, and what we would see there is a bunch of beautiful graves. And these graves tell us a lot about the people. You can see on the other side, it's really on the shores of the sea, is the Golan Heights, a beautiful view of the Golan Heights. Just some of the people that are really in this pantheon of Zionism, this place that teaches us a lot about Zionism, that are buried there. Our famous lyric and songwriter Nomi Shemer, you can see I'm sitting there, the one that wrote the famous, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, or Jerusalem of Gold song, right? Or Rachel, the poet, which is very famous, and rabbis like to quote her right now in this season of, the sermons of the high holidays. And Shaul Avigur, which was the creator of the Haganah, the underground military organization pre-army, and his son, okay, Gur Meirov, which was killed during the War of Independence. That's why it's a military grave. And he actually changed his name from Meirov to Avigur, the father of Gur, as his last name after the War of Independence, and he is buried next to him. But one of the people that is buried in this cemetery is a guy called Ben Zion Israeli, and his wife Chaya Israeli, as you can see here. And what's really interesting about their tombstones is, if you go to the other side, you ask me, what's that, all this to do with agriculture, is that if you see on the other side of this tombstone, there is a very big sculpture of a date palm. And the story goes back to the 1909, he is one of the founders, together with Rachel, of this Kfutzat Kinneret, and he has a dream, and his dream is to bring back to the land of Israel the date farming, and let's go, or traditional farming that was here during the biblical times and during the classic periods of the Mishnah and the Talmud, or what we call the Greek and Roman periods in Israel, and this is his dream. He dreams of it not only for it to be part of the view or the landscape of the land of Israel, but actually part of the economy, okay? And just to give you a little bit of background, most of the trees, recreational and non-recreational trees in this land of Israel, were actually cut down and torn down in the 19th century under the Ottomans, when they started building their steam trains and their train that goes to Damascus, and from there down to Mecca and Medina. So there were no more trees. And if you don't believe me, ask, Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, Mark Twain, when he comes to Israel, right? And he actually writes his book, My Voyage to the Holy Land. He writes there's only one tree around the whole Sea of Galilee. And the tour guides take them for their lunch after they walk in the footsteps of Jesus, right? To have it under that shade. There's no trees left. So they have to go back and create a tree. Just to show you a little bit of what the tree plantations look like today, we can go back to the biblical verses which talk about a land of milk and honey. And when they talk about land of milk and honey, we talk about the 7 species that the land of Israel was actually blessed by, as wheat and barley, right? And the pomegranates and grapes and figs and olives, and of course the honey that they talk about is not actually bees' honey in the time of the Bible or the Tanakh. They actually talk about what we call today silan, which is actually honey that is made out of dates, and that's where we get the dates from, milk and honey. It's great, great, great honey. We cook in it, everything. I really, really recommend. So this guy called Ben Zion Israeli, you can see him over here, during the 1920s, decides that we need to bring back to Israel to life these dates. And how do you get date trees? Well, apparently you don't just take a pit and you sprout it out, because dates are females and males, and you want to make sure you have female trees and the pollens. You only need one tree to pollinate an entire 500 trees by wind, or today we harvest and pollinate it manually. What you actually do is you use what's called offshoots. And offshoots are these little trees that grow at the bottom of the trunk of a tree. And in a specific way, you can actually detach it and replant it. And it is the exact same tree as the mother tree. If you take a majul date from a majul tree, you will have a female majul date tree. And who's the big growers at the time? We're talking about on the Euphrates and the Tigris. We're talking about Iran or Persia at the time, and Iraq and Egypt and Turkey and all over. And he goes on expeditions, not less than 7 trips around the Middle East, in order to convince people to sell him these offshoots. It is illegal in some of these areas to have these offshoots leave their area because of competition. And after his state of Israel is created, he goes for his last one in Persia. This is 1953, to purchase 70,000 offshoots. When he comes back, he is at a memorial for friends that fell in the war, and there's a plane that was doing a flyover, and the plane crashes into the crowd, and 17 people are killed, and he is one of them. And one of his partners that went with him with all these expeditions, Yanni Avidov, goes back to actually pick up these 70,000 shoots from Persia that he was promised, and they plant them. And this is the leftovers of them, called the Ben Zion Israeli Oasis, on the shores of Eilat in the south of Israel. So he is really the dreamer and the achiever of replanting the land of Israel with dates. We always like to say, you come to Israel, you want to have a nice, good, sweet date. But this is where they come from. So let's continue and actually take you back to the map of Israel. And now we're going to go to where it shows you here, A on the map. We are south of Israel, south of the sea, of the Dead Sea. Okay, we are east. This is the border over here with Jordan. And this is the Mediterranean. This is where the Gaza Strip is. So we're really in the Arava. We're going to go down. You can see this is the Dead Sea. Go down to a moshav. You can see it on the map here where we are, all the way down at the bottom. A moshav called Faran. And everything you can see around is a little area where people live, and all of the agriculture that is being grown in the desert. Most of what you see here is hot houses that have peppers, but a lot of them also, like as I could show you over here, are trees, mostly date trees. And I want to take you down there to meet a friend of mine that actually took that dream of dreamers and achievers of dates and is growing dates in Israel and the Arava today. So let's go see his plantation. Okay, so this is my friend Aviram Morris. I call him an agripreneur because in agriculture and an entrepreneur, he's a young guy and he drives up and down the Arava Valley, which today really has become the Valley of the Dates. Everywhere you drive, there's palm dates. You know, some of them are higher; they grow over a meter a year. So those who are 20 years old are 20 meters up in the air. That's quite big, right? It's about 60 feet up in the air. Those are big trees, and these are the new offshoots that he plants. And he has this dream to have a plantation, moves on to the Moshav, gets a little bit of an area, and plants 500 trees in honor of Ben Zion Israeli and to make a business out of them. 498 of them are Majul dates. These are the dates that the market loves. 2 of them are Dekel Nor or Nor dates, which he loves. So you have to have 2 trees that you like. There's a little market for it also. And the biggest problem for a farmer in Israel is waiting at least 4 years because of the religious obligations that you cannot harvest your tree for the first 4 years, or you cannot sell the produce. There's a religious obligation in the land of Israel. First, you have to let your tree mature. So what does a farmer do? Spends a ton of money on watering the tree, on growing the tree, and making nothing. So Aviram decides, you know what, this can't be. I need to at least get back, you know, what I put into it, into the trees itself. That's why I call him an agripreneur. And he creates an organization or a little fund, like a crowdfunding, where he allows people from all over to help him fund the initial amount of what it was for him to plant the tree. Each person that does this gets a sign near the tree, and later on today already on the tree when the tree grows. They get their tree in the land of Israel. They get to see how it grows every 6 months, and produce that comes off the tree every year is donated in their honor to a different organization that needs food, which is very interesting. And slowly, this picks up. And not only is he able to be an agriculture, but he is a farmer. He is able to sit back, or not really sit back, work hard and make it, which is really hard in this land, in Israel, in this field, which is an unbelievable sight to see. I actually went down there not long ago because he started the picking of the dates itself, and I'll say something about it after this quick video.
Hi, this is my friend Aviram in Moshav Faran, and he is an unbelievable date farmer. And we are the time of the Gadid. I want to say something for a minute about the Gadid, and I'm going to ask Aviram to say something about his trees. The word Gadid is unbelievable in Hebrew. It's a specific word just for the time of harvesting dates. And out of this word Gadid comes the verb ligdod, to harvest the dates. It is a specific word only for dates, which tells us that dates are special in this land, and we need to give it special attention. Aviram, can you tell us anything about what you're doing here right now, what we're at?
So we're exactly in the time of the Gadid, as Zalman said, and this time is about 1.5 months to 2 months, where the fruits, they turn from green to yellow, and then the sugar mixes in, and they actually become brown. So we can see that we have on the trees, we have yellow fruits, and we just picked the brown ones. The yellow fruits look like this, and then it starts to become brown on the tip, and it spreads all over until it gets to this point. We start to pick during this time. This is our first pick of the year, and we pick until the middle of October, around the middle of October, and it's a one-time pick once a year, and we have the Majul date and 2 other Dekel Nur dates, but we can see that the Majul dates are much bigger than most dates. They're called the kings of dates, and we have around 70 kilos of dates on this specific tree. Most of our trees we keep 70 kilos. As the tree grows bigger and bigger, around 80 centimeters a year, we get more fruit until it reaches a level of 120 to 140 kilos per tree.
These are unbelievable Majul dates. We just took them off the tree. This time of the Gadid is so amazing, and it's so amazing to see this excitement of ligdod and picking the dates. Toda rabba, Aviram.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to say something quickly about the word we said, ligdod. It's pretty amazing in Hebrew. Every one of the 7 species that the land of Israel was blessed by in the Bible, the wheat and barley and the figs and the grapes, has a different verb for picking them. You don't pick grapes. You don't pick olives in Israel. You don't harvest them. Each one has their specific word, which tells us that in ancient times and in the Jewish culture, there is a relationship between us and the land. And the relationship between us and the land is we come to the land. It is our responsibility to make it fruitful, to make it work, to work the land and make it give us abundance and make it give us make it sustainable. And which is really amazing that through the language you can actually see it. You can see here my son has a tree that was planted for him for his bar mitzvah, and we go down there almost every year to help him pick him. We were some of us down there, and he was there. This was last year, but my son was down there last week picking them too. And these are some friends of mine that came from Canada, tourists that we helped them. They went down there and we helped. Let's continue on this story of dreamers and achievers in the dates and agriculture. And we're going to actually go back up to the north. And you can see here again, it's great because we can zoom through the country or jump through the country, which we can't do on a bus. Even in 8 days, we can't do this much up and down the country in one day. We're going to another kibbutz called Sde Eliyahu. Again, kibbutz is this collective agriculture farming way of living that was created in 1909 and until today. It's all over the country. And in Sde Eliyahu, as we can see, it's just south of the Dead Sea, as of the Sea of Galilee, of the Kinneret. Okay, this is the lower Jordan River. I'm showing you with my arrow that goes all the way down to the Dead Sea. This whole area called the Jordan Valley is full with dates today. You drive down, all you see on both sides are dates. And this kibbutz, you can see it from the air. It's a little bit in the center of where the people live, a little bit about their farming, of their greenhouse farming, and everything around it is green. And right before World War II, a little boy or a 14-year-old guy called Mario Levi, a Jewish boy that was born in Trieste, outside of Rome in Italy, decides together with a bunch of other teenagers to get on a boat and arrive in the land of Israel, leaving his family there behind. And he is given a choice to live on a non-religious kibbutz or a Jewish religious kibbutz, and he chooses Sde Eliyahu to be part of the founders of this kibbutz called Sde Eliyahu. Never sees his family ever again. You can imagine what happened to the Italian Jews, to many of them. And this Mario Levi creates a family on this kibbutz, and he is a farmer, and he always dreamed to have his own little garden or a green garden, vegetable garden. And one day he starts discovering that they do tons of spraying of pesticides all over in order to keep their crops good, to keep their crops okay, to keep bugs away from their crops. As I showed you, they're living all around them is their fields. And he says to the kibbutz, this is crazy. We're spraying all these chemicals 360 degrees around where we live. We need to start doing different type of farming. We need to do organic farming. Let me try doing organic farming. Let me go overseas to Switzerland, to places that they're doing new things, to try it out. So they decide, you know what? Okay, we'll send you over there. He comes back with all these new methods and says to them, you know what? I want all of the fields in the first ring around the kibbutz. If I create organic farming in the first ring around the kibbutz, I'm going to make these chemicals further away from our kids. And they said, you know what? Okay, let's go. And here's an excerpt from his book. We can send it to you later, about his dream, really, of making agriculture organic and seeing it as part of the right way of working the land itself. Here you can see him as almost at his ripe age of 100. He has passed away ever since. And later on, he will create a company that the kibbutz today is worth millions because called BioBee. And let's take example of what he did with his BioBee company with the date farming. And you can see here on the right is the date plantation. You couldn't even get a whole picture of it. What he decides to do is an ecosystem of no sprays, no pesticides in the plantation. We'll take an example. Okay, you have these little pests that come to eat the fruit that are on the tree. So you need to spray them so those bugs don't come. He actually finds out that in the nature, there are predator bugs, which means there are other bugs that eat those bugs that eat the fruit, but they themselves don't like the fruit. And when there's no more bugs around for them to eat, they fly away. So he actually creates a company that makes these bugs. This is multiplied in a magnifying glass. The picture at the bottom, you can see the predator bug eating the bug that eats the fruit itself. They create them in hothouses in thousands. They sterilize them so they will not reproduce. It's also great because they could sell more to the farmers the next year. They give them to the farmers in salt shakers. They literally shake these bugs on the trees itself. These bugs eat the bugs that eat the fruit and fly away and die. And this way we don't have to pesticize it. All of a sudden, the date plantations are becoming more friendly with less chemicals. But that's not enough, because underneath the trees, there's undergrowth. As you can see here, all this green that's growing over. And also sometimes a very ripe date falls to the ground and starts rotting, and then we get worms, and we got to get rid of it. So what do? We pesticide. And he says, no, we can't pesticide. So they start closing the plantations with fences, and they put donkeys inside. And believe it or not, these donkeys are like lawnmowers. They eat everything they see underneath. So you don't need pesticides. But then he's got another problem, because there's rodents, these little things that are running around. How do you get rid of rodents? And exactly at that time, a professor called Yossi Leshem says, you know what? I have an idea. What's the idea that I have? Let's bring in barn owls. In Israel, we are losing our barn owls because they don't have places for nesting. So we're going to give you, as you can see here on this little box on top, a nesting box. It's, you know how expensive real estate is in Israel? These barn owls get a free 2-bedroom apartment from these farmers because they're nocturnal. So there's actually a wall in the middle. So they go to the back during the day, and during the night they come out. And believe it or not, they love to kill rodents. They kill 3 times more than they eat, actually. And the whole night, what are they doing? Eating rodents. And today they even are nesting castrels, which are day hunters, and they kill the day hunters. And this way we have bugs eating bugs, and donkeys eating undergrowth, and birds eating the rodents. And we have an ecosystem which is friendly from chemicals, all thanks to this guy, this dreamer and achiever called Mario Levy. And you know what's great about this? Because when you go to the States, to this place called Whole Foods, or what's the other one called? I'll remember in a minute. When you get an organic date, it brings up the value by a ton. Okay, not only it's very hot where these kibbutzim are, they are ripening first. They're getting out to the market first, which we all know brings the bucks, because you don't want to be in the market in the middle, because then you get competition. But you're not only in the market first, you're in the market first, and you are organic. And the Israeli date organics from Ben Zion Israeli, through my friend till today, is making a lot of money in the world itself. So it's a really amazing story. I'll just finish up the story very quickly with an anecdote. This is on the Jordan Valley. And these birds, when they wake up in the middle of the night, do you think that they know that there's a border? They don't know there's a border. So they fly right over to eat the rodents also in Jordan. The problem is, in the Muslim tradition, owls are like the devil. So they pull out their shotguns and they start shooting them. So we got a problem. So Yossi Leshem and a bunch of team go over to Jordan, and they start showing them that if you nest these nesting owls in a field, like a field of corn, for instance, your yield goes up between 30 to 40%. What do you think the Jordanian farmer says? We're not going to shoot them anymore. Give me your owls. And this white owl, this barn owl, has changed, or took over the position of what we call the white dove. And today we have a program called Birds Without Borders. All of this just because of the biological pesticides. Let's go to one last site so we can close up the story. And this, again, is going to take us all the way south. Look at this, all the way, even more south than where we were. And this is Kibbutz Torah. It's actually a conservative kibbutz created by members of Young Judea and the conservative movement when they made Aliyah. Just north, about a half an hour north of the city of Eilat, the Gulf of Aqaba. And you can see one of the things that they do is they actually grow or raise in these tubes, in these crystals, algae. They make a ton of money. They thought they were going to put them in salmon fish ponds to make the salmon pink. And all of a sudden, all the cosmetics in the world said, we want this. And they're making millions over the cosmetics. But in the background, you can see the date plantations, how big they are all over. And in the background, you can see the Jordanian mountains, and Petra sits here in these mountains. So I take you all the way down there because of this guy called Yigael Yadin. Yigael Yadin was one of founders of the state of Israel. He was one of the generals during the War of Independence, but he actually finishes and becomes a professor for archaeologists. He is the son of the professor of archaeology, Sukenik Yadin, right? Sukenik, which actually was the first person to purchase Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947. And this is him sitting on top of Masada with the first excavations of Masada in 1963 and 1965. And within his excavations of Masada, he finds raw materials. And in these raw materials, he finds a clay vessel, which is very dry there, with a couple tens, about 50 dried out date palm seeds, pits. And he has this dream. Oh my God, I have 2,000-year-old date pits. I want to understand what was the variety of dates my ancestors actually ate here 2,000 years ago. But we don't know how to sprout pits. So he goes to a professor he hears of in Bar Ilan called Mordechai Kislev. This is still living in Jerusalem until today. And Mordechai Kislev is trying to reproduce in his environment, in his lab, what the physical environment looked like in the biblical and in the classic times. When they talk about in our sources of trees, is the tree we call X actually the tree our ancestors called X 2,000 years ago? Or what they were serving in the temple, is it what we have today? And he says, wow, this is a great idea. But at that time, nobody knew how to take archaeological pits and sprout them. So he has this dream, but he puts it in, he couldn't find anywhere to do it. He puts it in the drawer of his desk, and he waits, and he waits. And he always looks at different things until 40 years later, he finds in a footnote of something that he's reading that there are people in the United States which are also looking at ancient varieties that were found in archaeological sites, and they can actually find a way to sprout them. So he calls up the United States to a lady called Dr. Sarah Salon to see if she can help him actually sprout it. And lo and behold, the place where she used to work at says, I'm sorry, but unfortunately for us, she decided to pick up and move to the land of her ancestors. She moved to Jerusalem. And he goes, oh my God, that's even better. She's down the road. And she's running a lab at the Hadassah Jerusalem Hospital. So he goes there and he meets with Dr. Sarah Salon. And she says, you know what? This is a great project. Let's start sprouting this. So they start sprouting it, but they need a place where they can actually plant it. Jerusalem's not a good environment. And they find another American lady, and her name is Elena Soloway. She is living on Kibbutz Torah at the time, one of the founders of the Arava Institute, which is a sustainable research institute for agriculture, where people come from all over the world to learn, Palestinians, Jordanians, to learn how to do it. And she says, you know what? You do your lab work, you do your research, I will do the growing, send me down the offshoots. And they start growing and sprouting over 20 little sprouts in little pots. And then she starts planting them. And one of the ones that they plant will be named Methuselah, because Methuselah was the oldest person in the Bible. And this is the oldest date tree in the world. The only problem with this date tree is it's a male date tree and it will never bear fruit. So what do? How do we know what kind of date, what it tasted like for our ancestors 2,000 years ago? They waited and waited, and another one sprouted. Another one sprouted, and they're actually going to call her Hannah or Hannah for the first, the mother of Samuel, which she was barren, and she prayed for a son, and all of a sudden, they have a female tree. And they take the pollen from Methuselah, and they have other trees, one called Adam, and they pollinate, this new female tree called Hannah, and lo and behold, last year, they had their first harvest of a variety from 2,000 years ago called the Judean Desert Date variety. And hopefully, this is a variety that's going to pick up and really market Israel in a different place. It will be a healthy variety, a sweet variety. Everything we need about it is under beginning of research. And here we close a circle of our ancient land. What I like to say, we are an ancient people and a young country. We are a 75-year-old country, but our roots, literally, our tree roots and our heritage roots, our traditional roots, are rooted in this land for over 3,000 years. And we could do a full circle with the dreamers and achievers that came here only 75 years ago or only 100 years ago and said, not only are we going to live in this land, we're going to redeem this land by working it, and it will redeem us. And part of the redemption is connecting to a past. And here you can see some of the dreamers and achievers we spoke about today. Ben Zion Yisraeli that came from Kishinev, after the pogrom in Kishinev that Bialik wrote about, and everybody to Israel, and decided we need to have a land full of dates again. To my friend Aviram, just one of many as an example, which is growing a plantation of fruitful dates in Israel. Mario Levy, that passed away, blessed memory, which brought it to a whole different level, high-tech dates, ecological friendly dates, and the old and new that was created down in Kibbutz Kturah. This is the story of dates. It's the tip of the iceberg of the story of agriculture. You can take this to, we can go into the wine industry that was recreated here in Israel. We can go into the farming of many other things, olive industry, the olive oil industry. And really today, it's not the issue of how much we grow, because we can never sustain ourselves in this little land, enough for the people that are living here, but it's actually exporting the knowledge and the know-how of taking this agriculture to an entirely different level. With this, I hope you enjoyed touring around Israel. I hope it gave you a little bit of a taste of the people we're going to see, of the stories we're going to see, of the places and the smells and the views that you're going to see together with the Pittsburgh Mega Mission when you come over.